Ethan and Mara thought a late-night drive through Blackpine Road would be harmless, but the fog swallowed their headlights, the trees reached like hands, and whispers called their names. Something was watching, waiting, and it never lets anyone leave. I was driving alone down Blackpine Road, a stretch of asphalt that cut through dense ancient forest. The sun had already disappeared behind thick gray clouds, leaving everything in a dim, oppressive twilight. Even in daylight, this road had always unsettled me. The way it twisted and curved without warning, the way shadows clung to the edges of the pavement, and the way the forest seemed to lean in, watching. That night, the unease was far stronger. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, but I told myself it was just exhaustion. I had been driving for hours, and fatigue played tricks on the mind. The wind whistled through the trees, rustling the leaves in sharp, eerie patterns. Every so often, a branch scraped the side of my car, and my heart jumped. I told myself it was just the wind. The deeper I went, the heavier the fog became. It rolled in from the sides like a living thing, thickening with every mile. My headlights barely cut through it, casting long, trembling shadows. I kept thinking I saw movement in the mist, figures shifting just beyond the reach of light. But every time I blinked, nothing was there. It was as if the road itself was teasing me, stretching moments of tension into eternity. Then I saw it. A figure standing still at the edge of the road just beyond my headlights. Its posture was rigid, unnatural. I slowed, heart hammering. My pulse raced so violently I could feel it in my ears. I blinked, and it was gone. Only a single footprint remained in the dirt beside the asphalt. Deep, too deep to be human. I forced myself to keep driving, though the sense of being watched grew stronger with every turn. The trees seemed to close in, their branches scratching at the sides of the car. Shapes flickered in the corner of my eyes, too quick to identify yet impossible to ignore. Once I thought I saw a child crouching by the side of the road, staring silently. When I blinked, it had vanished. Only a small, broken toy lay in its place, its paint chipped, its glassy eyes staring back at me with something almost alive. I swallowed hard and tried to calm my racing thoughts. It was just exhaustion. Just imagination. The road narrowed, curving sharply as the fog thickened into a gray wall. The sound of the engine was the only thing breaking the silence, but beneath it, I could hear a faint scratching from outside, like fingernails dragging across metal. My body froze. The sound moved with me, keeping pace no matter how fast I drove. I risked a glance in the rearview mirror, but the road behind me seemed empty, the mist smooth and undisturbed. Yet the scratching continued, slow and deliberate, echoing in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was moving with me, something that didn't belong, something that was patient, waiting for the right moment. I pressed the accelerator harder, desperate to leave the figure, the footprints, the shadows behind me. The fog seemed to thicken even faster, pressing against the car like a living wall. And then, for a split second, I saw movement in the trees, not just shadows, but eyes, reflecting the faint light of my headlights. I blinked, and they were gone. But the feeling of being watched didn't leave. I realized with a sickening certainty that Blackpine Road wasn't just dangerous, it was alive, and it had already noticed me. The air grew colder, heavier, and I felt it. I was no longer alone. Something had joined me on the road, silent, waiting, and I didn't know if I would ever escape it. The deeper I drove into the forest, the thicker the fog became, wrapping around the car like a living shroud. Every bend in the road felt sharper than the last, every shadow heavier, and the trees seemed to stretch taller, their twisted branches clawing toward the sky. My headlights barely cut through the mist, but I could swear I was seeing movement, figures slipping between the trunks, lingering just outside the edge of the light. I told myself it was exhaustion, that my mind was playing tricks, yet a cold knot of dread twisted in my stomach. The scratching sound from before had returned, slow and deliberate, moving in rhythm with my own heartbeat. It came from everywhere and nowhere, impossible to locate. As I rounded a sharp curve, I noticed something lying in the middle of the road. It was small at first, but as I approached, I realized it was a doll, or something resembling one. Its head was tilted at an impossible angle, one glassy eye cracked, the other reflecting my headlights like a tiny hollow mirror. Its limbs were twisted, as if it had been bent and broken over and over. I swerved to avoid it, my heart pounding, and when I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw hundreds of tiny shapes scattered along the roadside. Small objects, toys, bits of cloth, and scraps of paper, all arranged as if someone, or something, had been watching me the entire way, leaving a trail just for me to follow. I tried to rationalize it, but a voice in the back of my mind whispered a truth I didn't want to admit. I was not alone. The road began to narrow suddenly, the trees closing in like walls of black stone. Branches scraped against the roof and sides of the car, their touch almost deliberate, as if they were guiding me deeper into the forest. I noticed reflections in the side mirrors, faces appearing briefly, twisting with agony and malice, then vanishing the instant I turned my gaze directly toward them. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and they returned, more vivid, more demanding. The headlights flickered, and for a moment, I felt my pulse seize. The air had grown impossibly cold, each breath turning to mist inside the car. My hands shook on the wheel, and I realized that the road behind me was no longer visible. The fog had swallowed it completely, and there was no turning back. A faint glow appeared ahead, not the warm yellow of streetlights, but a dull, flickering orange. It floated above the road, moving slowly, drifting as if carried by the wind. At first I thought it was a lantern someone had left behind, but as I drew closer, I realized there was no one holding it. The light hovered above the asphalt, bobbing slightly, and more began to appear. A dozen, then dozens, all floating, drifting toward me, yet never touching the trees or the ground. I felt panic grip me, a sense of inevitability. The glowing shapes were alive, patient, aware of me, and I was trapped in their silent, unrelenting attention. The road seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, yet the lights moved faster, closing in. I pressed the accelerator harder, but the fog thickened, swallowing the car, the road, and my hope. And then I saw it, through the mist, just at the edge of my headlights, a figure standing directly in the middle of the road. Its body was pale, unnaturally thin, its head tilted at a wrong angle. It didn't move, but I felt its gaze pierce through me, into me, and a cold, suffocating weight pressed against my chest. My vision blurred, and I realized with dread that I could not look away. The figure lifted one spindly hand, pointing directly at me, and the floating lights around me all turned to face the car, glowing brighter, revealing dozens of faces twisted in silent screams. My hands tightened on the wheel, and I understood something horrifying. I had not driven into the forest. I had driven into something alive, and it had been waiting for me. The figure in the middle of the road didn't move, yet I could feel it watching every inch of me. My hands were locked on the wheel, knuckles white, and my foot hovered over the accelerator, but the road felt different. It was as if the asphalt itself had turned soft, bending beneath the tires, pulling me toward the center where the figure stood. Panic clawed at my chest. I tried to drive around it, but the road twisted unnaturally, turning in impossible angles. The trees leaned closer, their branches scraping like fingernails across the roof and windows. The fog had thickened so much that the world outside the headlights no longer existed. I was trapped in a tunnel of mist, trees, and shadows. Then I saw them. Hundreds of tiny figures emerging from the fog along the roadside. They weren't human, though they had vaguely humanoid shapes. Thin, elongated limbs bent at sharp, unnatural angles. Their heads were too large for their bodies, and their eyes glowed faintly. reflecting the pale light of my headlights. They didn't move like living things, more like marionettes animated by some unseen force. They followed me silently, always at the edge of the light, always keeping pace no matter how fast I drove. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. The air was too thick, too cold. A sudden movement in the fog made me jerk the wheel. Another figure had appeared directly in front of the car, materializing from the mist as if it had always been there. It was taller than the others, more defined, with a head that tilted in impossible directions. Its eyes were dark voids, and its mouth stretched in a silent scream that seemed to echo inside my skull. I tried to drive past it, but my car refused. The accelerator pressed down and the engine roared, but we weren't moving forward. The road had disappeared, replaced by a gray, churning fog. My breath came in ragged gasps, each exhale freezing in the air before me. The small figures began to close in, their glowing eyes reflecting in the windshield, hundreds of tiny points of light surrounding me. I realized with a growing horror that they weren't just following me. They were guiding me. Every twist and turn of the road seemed orchestrated by them, directing me deeper into the forest, deeper into something alive and malevolent. I tried to reverse, but it was useless. The mist was thicker behind me than in front, as if the forest itself had swallowed the road I came from. My sense of direction vanished entirely. Then I saw the hands. Not the small figure's hands, but enormous, twisted branches that had risen from the trees, bending toward the car. Their tips were sharp, claw-like, scratching the paint, scraping the windshield. One pressed against the glass with unnatural strength, leaving smears that looked disturbingly like blood. I slammed my foot on the brake, but the car slid forward as if the asphalt had become ice. I could feel something crawling across the roof, something that whispered in a voice I could feel in my bones rather than hear. It spoke of waiting, of hunger, of being lost forever. I turned to look at the side mirrors, and dozens of glowing eyes stared back, faces frozen in agony, mouths open in silent screams. Then it moved. Slowly, deliberately, a single step toward the car. The fog around it swirled unnaturally, forming shapes that twisted into hands and faces, all reaching for me. My heart thudded so hard it hurt. The car wasn't just trapped, it was a cage, and I was inside with something patient, something hungry. As the figure raised its head fully, the eyes on the roadside flickered like dying embers. I realized with terror that it wasn't the only one. Hundreds, maybe thousands of them had been waiting, and I had stumbled right into their grasp. The car lurched, as if the road beneath me had turned into something alive. The tires skidded on a surface that wasn't asphalt. It felt soft, almost organic, pulsing beneath the weight of the vehicle. I slammed my hands on the wheel, but it barely responded. The fog had grown so dense I could no longer see the edges of the road, only the glowing eyes that hovered in every direction. They weren't stationary anymore. They swirled around me, drifting closer, forming shapes that resembled figures but moved like smoke, twisting and stretching in impossible ways. The cold inside the car was suffocating, chilling me to the bone, and I realized with a shiver that every breath I drew felt heavier, like the air itself was resisting me. A sudden thump against the roof made me jerk. I looked up, my stomach tightening. Branches, or something that resembled them, had broken through the fog and pressed against the metal. They were long, thin, gnarled, and tipped with jagged nails that scratched and scraped the car's roof. I could see the outlines of hands, pale and twisted, pressed against the windows. Each tap, each scrape, echoed inside the car like it was drilling into my skull. My chest tightened. My pulse was a hammer in my ears, and a desperate thought clawed through my mind. I needed to escape, but the road was gone. The asphalt beneath me had become a maze of fog and shadows, and every direction I turned led me deeper into the forest. The small figures from before had multiplied. Hundreds of them, stretching taller and thinner, now filled the roadside and the space around the car. their heads tilted in impossible angles, eyes glowing faintly orange in the fog. They didn't just watch, they moved with intent, hurting me, guiding the car forward. I tried to reverse, but the accelerator pressed itself against my foot. The engine roared as if alive, pushing me into the twisting path that wasn't a road anymore. My hands trembled as I gripped the wheel, helpless against the invisible force steering the car. Then came the whispering. It started as a faint hiss, like the wind rustling the leaves, but it quickly became intelligible. Voices spoke from all directions, calling my name over and over. They weren't human voices. They were thin, hollow, dripping with malice and patience. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the sound burrowed into my skull, vibrating in rhythm with my heartbeat. The figures grew bolder, stepping onto the road itself, their twisted forms leaning closer, reaching for me with long, spindly arms. I could see their mouths moving, silent screams echoing in the mist. A movement in the fog ahead made me freeze. A single figure had emerged from the swirling mist, taller and darker than the rest. Its eyes glowed like coals, and its presence felt like pressure on my chest, a weight that made breathing nearly impossible. As I watched, it raised a hand, slowly, deliberately, pointing at me. The smaller figures responded instantly, turning to face me, hundreds of glowing eyes fixed on the car. I realized with bone-deep dread that they were waiting for a signal, and whatever came next would not be something I could survive. The fog thickened to an impenetrable wall, the lights dimmed, and the whispers grew into a roar inside my head, drowning out the engine, the branches, the forest, everything, until the car and I were completely alone in darkness. The darkness was absolute, pressing against the car from every direction. The fog had swallowed everything. The road, the trees, even the glowing eyes that had followed me so relentlessly. But I knew they were there, just beyond the veil, waiting. My hands shook uncontrollably on the wheel, and my breath came in short, ragged bursts that felt like knives against my lungs. I tried to start the car, but the engine refused to turn over. It was as if the forest itself had claimed it, draining every ounce of life and energy from the metal and from me. The whispers returned, louder now, a chorus of thin, rasping voices chanting my name, circling me in the black void. A sudden weight landed on the roof, and I flinched violently. Something pressed down with impossible strength, making the car groan as if it were a toy. I could feel fingers scraping along the glass, long and thin, leaving marks that looked like cracks but glowed faintly red, like veins. My eyes darted to the side mirrors. Shadows moved there, twisting, elongating, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. Faces appeared briefly, screaming silently, then vanished. It was a forest of watchers, each one waiting for the signal I knew would come. My chest ached. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might explode, and a creeping thought crawled into my mind. I was already too deep to turn back. Then I saw it, through the windshield, faint in the fog, a single path illuminated by a strange, pulsing orange light. It wasn't a road. It was more like a living vein, writhing and twisting, stretching into the black forest ahead. I had no choice but to follow it. As I drove, the whispers grew louder, voices overlapping, speaking in a language I didn't understand, yet somehow knew. The small figures appeared again, now on the path itself, their glowing eyes fixed on me, moving as if synchronized with the road. They guided me deeper, and with each turn, each inch, the weight on the car seemed to grow heavier, pressing down, forcing me forward. The taller figure from before emerged from the fog again, standing directly in front of the car. Its eyes were coals of black fire, its mouth a void that seemed to swallow the dim light around it. My instincts screamed to stop, to reverse, but the car would not respond. It moved forward as if the forest itself were steering, pushing me into the figure's path. As I approached, I realized that the figure was not alone. Thousands of others had emerged, faceless, twisted shapes, stretching infinitely in every direction. They were waiting, patient, eternal, and I understood that this was not just a place. They were the place, the forest, the road, the fog, and they had existed long before I arrived. A cold realization struck me. I would never leave. My vision blurred as the figures closed in, the fog curling around the car like fingers, blocking every possible escape. And then, a hand pressed against the glass. A pale, impossibly long hand with nails like shards of glass. The windshield cracked under the pressure, spreading like veins of black ice. I tried to scream, but no sound emerged. And then the lights went out. The car, the forest, the road, all vanished. Only the whisper remained, endless and patient. Somewhere, deep in the blackness, I could feel the pulsing of the path beneath me, alive and waiting for the next traveler. And in that infinite silence, I realized the most terrifying truth. Blackpine Road had not ended. It never would. And neither would I.